Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of the Kolpack and Izzo Podcast, brought to you by Gate City Bank. We were well set to talk about a football game, Dakota Marker Week, but that's not happening. North Dakota State game with South Dakota State has been postponed till April 17th, the second consecutive Saturday without a Bison football game, as more games have gone off the calendar even since then. More teams have dropped off as we try and now it's hobbling towards the finish line. My colleague is on the road, but he will join us here through the lovely part of technology and Zoom. So you have gone through this before as we were landing in Vermilion last Saturday with the phones blowing up and finding out that there's no football game happening. The announcement came early, like we talked about last week, Jeffrey, that they were going to have to make up their minds pretty quickly about what was going to happen with the South Dakota State game. Now the question is, do we even get to the finish line? What do you think?
Well, things change pretty dramatically, don't they? I mean, NDSU for 2 months in this football season was just going by so unscathed. But then you look across the country, you see that game postponed, that one canceled, that one postponed, and then reality hit home. This is hobbling to the finish line. Is that the question, Dom? Are we going to get there? Is there going to be a playoff?
What do you think?
It seems 50-50 to me right now.
Yeah.
It came out with the rankings this week, so at least the committee is saying, let's move forward.
Well, and that was almost like under the cover of darkness. Nobody knew about it, which, I mean, we can go into that on the FCS ranks till the cows come home, that they decided to let it go on a SEC baseball game on ESPNU in the middle of the night. I mean, that's bizarre in its own right. And then change the rules again to allow the MEAC to have an automatic bid, even though their league isn't even playing. Only 3 teams are playing in it. It seems like we're making – I know the college football as a whole, Jeff, made it up as they went along in the fall. But that was the fall. That's when football normally is played. It's not normally played in April, and that's why it makes it so weird.
I thought for sure that was an April Fool's joke.
Yeah.
Right. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I go, okay, there's no way. That is somebody's putting out a April Fool's. Okay, I get it. Funny. So it's true?
Yeah, it's true.
It's unbelievable. You know what I think we learned this week was the stress that the players and coaches have felt through this duration, and a new term surfaced this week called testing anxiety. I thought Matt Entz on Monday at his press conference, that was as stressed and has bloodshot eyes, deliberate speech. He looked like a head coach, and I don't fault him for this, looked like a head coach about ready to crack. I mean, I'm sure he hasn't slept in 2 weeks. So, and then Josh Hayes, the senior cornerback, relayed that he feels more like a counselor of sorts.
Yeah.
On these younger players. And he talked about testing anxiety. You test on Wednesday, and then you wait for the results on your phone. All of a sudden the message comes, you look it up, and you don't know if you're asymptomatic positive. That's the big fear for these players, that they test positive even though they don't know it. And then they cost their team a chance to play that week. The pressure's enormous on the back of these kids.
Yeah.
18, 19 years old, and you don't want to be the guy to have to say, okay, I'm positive, game done. It's all my fault. 110 guys, and it's all my fault. That's huge pressure, Don.
Yeah, I thought Entz on Monday, that was about as forthright as he's ever been since he's taken over as head coach. You could see it. You mentioned it. You wrote about it. You could see it on his face that it's wearing on him. And I know I asked the question, just is it still worth it? And I know Mike asked it as well. And he said, yeah, he flat out said, Jeff, we've got better, but at what expense is my point? You know, and like here we are. It's okay. We would normally be wrapping up spring ball in a couple weeks, and that might be a good way for the FCS to say, we tried, and we'll see everybody on August 1.
What do you think's holding back this decision? Is it because they knew, quote unquote, there were going to be bumps in the road? And
I don't know.
To his administration, they say, well, so far when it's all said and done, we've only lost one game. The Jackrabbit game will be on April 17th, and that's true. Patty Viverito said, we're scheduling 8 games. If we get 6 in, it'll be success. So So they're following their plan.
Yeah, that is true, and I said that to you before we even started. I said if they got 6 in, they'd be lucky. They've got 5 so far, but now with Northern Iowa and USD not playing, I'll ask you flat out. I mean, what's Northern Iowa's incentive to play next week now that they're done? You know what I mean? That I would be surprised if that game happens now.
I don't know, because Mark Farley wants to beat NDSU. That's the way I can think of.
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Their quarterback hasn't played in a month. They've had injuries. They saw a couple guys go down that may not be back in the fall.
Yep.
Why you'd risk another guy going down and not be available in the fall is absolutely beyond me. I have no idea.
Yep. And obviously now South Dakota with its positive test, you automatically now draw the link to next week if the Jacks Coyote game can't happen. Because you imagine that game probably is not going to be played. I would be stunned if that game happens.
I think what we used to see is the players the Bison really had out. They're not revealing numbers, and I get that. You don't want to blame one position, but I'm hearing they maybe had like 55 guys available for this game.
Wow.
South Dakota State.
Man.
That's the figure I'm hearing. That's not confirmed, but you got to figure, and that doesn't mean everybody's positive, but you have contact tracing and all those. I mean, there's a variety of reasons you could not be eligible to play this game. Well, not a variety, but you're positive. So it's not just 3 guys. I mean, it was a lot who were affected in some way or another.
Whether they actually had it or they were contact tracing around it. And that's the whole dilemma of trying to do this is that. And you have no idea how many guys, like Matt N said, you can't really put your backup punter as a defensive end. That just doesn't work. You can't just plug and play.
You know what, Tom? And let's look forward here. I mean, I know we're talking about the president this week, but at what point do we move on from all these testing to actually just playing? And at what point do you transition to, okay, you can only play if you're vaccinated.
Right.
Let's stop next fall.
Yep.
Right? At some point, you got to live and play sports. You can't have one positive test in next October 3rd and cancel homecoming. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah, I think your point on the vaccination, obviously that was brought up to Matt Entz as well on Monday. Now that vaccinations are open for basically everyone in North Dakota over 16 years old, he said that's normally a mom and dad conversation, but obviously he's going to be inserted into that. He's playing dad for a lot of these guys that are far away from their parents to say, it's time for you to go get this. And that's a conversation, Jeff, that's even beyond football, but I think you're right on to say, the only way we're going to play is if our teams are vaccinated and healthy enough to play.
Okay. And so at that, who makes that decision? I suppose the NCAA or the school or the conference or the FCS. I mean, it's got to be a decision company-wide here that.
Yep.
Again, I go back to you have to be vaccinated to play, okay? Maybe make that stipulation. And if you want to be vaccinated or if you have some you can appeal that. But we got to, at some point in the next 6 months, we got to stop this. We can't live like this anymore.
Yeah, and I don't know what's going to take on that front, honestly, because I know there'll be pushback for people that just don't want to and maybe don't believe in it. And that's a whole other conversation to go down. But I don't know what the right answer is on this. I don't. It's as we sit here right now on the 2nd of April, it makes little sense to keep on playing. And let me ask you about, I know you know plenty of either Bison fans, alums, donors. What's the thought or what you've heard over the last couple weeks? Are they gung-ho about finishing, or are they okay with saying, you know what, we tried and we'll see you in the fall?
I know the players want to finish it out. I know the players are still pretty engaged with this and want to see it through. They want games. They still see that carrot of a title. They don't care about VMI. They don't care about the CAA having positive tests. They're just worried about their own backyard here. They want to play. Mm-hmm. They're in school to play. That's why they're here. So that's not. I mean, fans. I think the fans are. I don't know if they care much. The boosters. That's a tough call. I think they just get the next.
And that's the debate of what's going to happen here. I mean, it'd be awesome to have a North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Dakota Marker game because there's so much at stake. And now as we find out, there's one less at-large bid to be considered for the postseason tournament, how much more important that game now becomes. But it all comes now with a major, I don't know if asterisk is the right word, but just this cloud of we don't even know if the game's going to happen. And that's the part that just is really difficult to wrap our minds around right now.
Well, for sure, the Valley's down to 2, right?
You'd think so, yeah. I mean, you'd have to think that with the MEAC still getting an automatic bid, yeah, you'd have to think that the dream of 3 is not going to happen.
Let me ask you this: the Bison will actually make that trek. How many are going to be in Frisco?
Well, right now
how many will the
NCAA is saying 25% right now is capacity. That's what they're limiting it to.
Yeah, so 1,000 Bison fans?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, that's...
On the 15,000 we're used to.
There's still a lot of things that could happen between then and now. Just crazy. All right, my man, we'll let you go. Have a great Easter weekend, and we'll be back on Monday to see what's going on next week, okay?
Sounds great, Dom. Another day, another adventure, right?
No doubt about it. All right, folks, that's the latest edition of the Kolpack and Izzo Podcast. Have a great holiday weekend, and we'll be back next week. See if we're actually talking about a football game. Until next time.